Rick Schumacher with LBM Journal. I want to thank you for joining today's webinar, Maximize Your Business Value by Improving Operations. Every business owner will eventually have to transition ownership. The best way to control that eventual transition is to strengthen your operations today. Why? Because stronger operations create a business with predictable processes, which lead to predictable profits, which leads to a predictable and typically higher business valuation. In today's webinar, Sam Brownell and his guest, Andrea Dunathan of Dunathan Consulting, will discuss the following questions to help you solidify your transition plan. Why should you invest in improving your operations as preparation for your succession plan? What are important operational improvements for you to consider? How does a professional will help maintain continuity during an ownership transition? And how do stronger operations impact the value of my business? Sam Brownell, CVA, CFA, MBA, and Sam, hopefully you can tell us what those all stand for.
Sure.
Is founder and financial advisor at Stratus Wealth Advisors, who's also the sponsor of this webinar. Sam has been a financial pro since 2006 and formed Stratus Capital Management in July 2013, which has since grown into Stratus Wealth Advisors to provide goals-based financial planning and investment management to individuals, families, and independent business owners. As the firm grew, an increasing number of independent business owners sought Sam's advice on their short and long-term planning needs, including valuation, tax strategy, business continuity planning, and succession planning. In 2019, Sam obtained the CVA certification, which stands for Certified
Valuation Analyst. Yep.
Boom. In order to better serve the valuation and succession planning needs of his independent business owner clients. You can learn more about Stratus Wealth Advisors at stratuswealthadvisors.com. A couple of details before we get started. All attendees are muted, so you can hear us, but we can't hear you. If you're having technical issues, click the chat button at the bottom of the screen to send us a message, and we'll work to quickly address any problems. If you have questions for Sam or Andrea, click the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen anytime during the presentation, and they'll address as many questions as possible after the presentation. And lastly, we expect the webinar to be finished in about 30 to 40 minutes. We are recording it, and we'll send a link to the recording to everyone who registered. Plus, it will be posted on lbmjournal.com. And with that, I turn it over to Sam and Andrea.
Great. Thanks, Rick. Again, thanks to the whole LBM Journal team for having us. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We know it's headed into a weekend before a holiday week, so we appreciate your time. As Rick said, my name is Sam Brownell, and those letters after my name are analytical designations, right? As certified valuation analyst and certified financial analyst. So those are things that we do as part of our job here at Stratus Wealth Advisors. And a big part of our practice, I would say the majority of our practice, is in the LBM space and working with independent dealers like yourselves to go from everything from what is the business worth to how do we transition it, how do we mitigate risk and taxes, how does that fit into your personal financial plan, and then how do we make that money last, right? How do we build net worth for our family that's intergenerational? So that's what we do, and I'm really excited to have my colleague Andrea here, and I'm going to let her introduce herself so we can jump into the content.
Great. Sam and Rick, thank you both so much for inviting me today. I really appreciate it. So as Sam and Rick both mentioned, I'm a business operations consultant. I founded Dunathan Consulting back in 2004. And some of the things that I offer to my clients include a general operational assessment to identify opportunities to increase the efficiency of the operations, which generally increases your profit margins, and also opportunities to improve the transferability of the business if you're thinking about exit. I work with a lot of organizations that have challenging operational problems and they need solutions for something specific. And I do provide advice and guidance through the entire process from A to Z so that you end up with a well-functioning business at the end. Back to you.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I would just say that in an industry like this, even a half percentage point in margin can make a big difference when you're talking about valuation, right? I mean, we all know that this is not an industry that's driving 20 or 30% on the bottom line. We're in the single digits. And so from a valuation standpoint, getting that extra half a percent can make a big difference as you approach that end of the line, at least for your ownership and the sustainability of the company from there on. So as Rick said, we've got four major discussion questions that we're going to hit on today. And really, it's all driven back to this idea of looking at operational improvement as an investment in your business, because what it does is it will ultimately drive money to the bottom line. Well, money to the bottom line, especially sustainable money to the bottom line, that makes it easier to transition to business. That's what, whether the buyer are your children, your employees, an outside party, that's what people want to see. It makes the whole process easier. And so that's really what we want to get into today as we walk through this webinar. And that's where Andrea's expertise is going to be very valuable to everybody on this call. So again, why do we want to do this? And Rick said it up top, it's those 3 Ps, and we'll hit on them before, but the first one is predictable processes. When you are selling your business, you want to, it's essentially like selling a house, right? How is somebody going to make money with the tools that you already have in place, right? What is it that you do well? Is it documented? Is everybody on the same page? And is everybody able to do this in a repeatable manner? Right. And you start thinking about things like turnkey is words that come to mind, but it really is. It doesn't mean that there's not room for people to be entrepreneurial or to come up with solutions that are outside the box, but it means that the business is functioning really well, because at the end of the day, nobody is going to pay you for something that they're going to have to invest in themselves. So make an investment now is what we're saying, and that will lead to a higher value down the line, more profitable business, and also probably a lot more fun to run. And it will avoid some of these problems, right? At the bottom here, and Andrea will talk a little bit more detail, but you've owned the business for a long time. You have a certain way of doing things. You've built up a tremendous amount of institutional knowledge, but if it's still in your head, that's very challenging, right? We've got to get it out of there and start to mentor and teach people, because sometimes the timing of the transition isn't up to you, even if you planned. But the benefit is, if you do plan, there are processes in place to take you forward and your business forward. If you don't plan, you can end up like this next example that Andrew's going to give in a position that's really not a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, sometimes people think, death or disaster, it's not going to happen to me. And, I'm here to say it's not a scare tactic. It's real. There was an operation down the street from me, actually. It was a small operation. It was run by an owner. He was in his 40s. He had a few staff. He knew how to run the business, of course. His staff knew how to do their individual roles. They could sell, they could stock the store, they could clean, whatever. He, out of the blue, died of a heart attack. So his wife inherited, of course. However, she had never learned how to open or close the store. She had never learned how to run payroll. She didn't know how to restock the store. Suddenly she's out of luck. This business, they literally didn't know how to open the doors, how to pay the employees. The business closed within 2 months, and all that value was lost. She was not able to sell it to somebody else, because what did she have to sell? A little bit of inventory and a lease that she had no way to pay, and no operation that she could sell. So these things really do happen. I have another client, actually, where the leader also died from a car accident. Not her fault. Somebody else hit her, out of the blue. So these are the worst case scenarios, but it is worth taking it seriously, because it does happen, even though we don't like to think about it. Next slide,
Yeah.
Sam.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a really, really good point. And it could even be something not death related, right? You get stuck overseas on travel, and somebody might, how's the company going to run? So all of these things are good practice for that ultimate transition.
Yes, definitely. So what we've just been talking about is that risk reduction, but I want to comment also that when you increase efficiency in your operation, as Sam mentioned, that typically leads to higher profit margins. Well, if you do that now and you don't wait 10 years till you're ready to retire, you're going to appreciate those higher profit margins for the next 10 years. It's going to benefit you, and it will benefit you as Sam mentioned. So having that efficient operation really leads to a smooth transition whenever you choose to do so. Doesn't have to be right now. It could be 10 years from now, but you're going to appreciate it meanwhile, right? Your employees are going to be more engaged. They're going to be more productive. If you decide you want to take a vacation and truly unplug, suddenly you have someone who could step in temporarily and run it for you. And the stress level goes down. So, thanks.
Yeah. And in this industry in particular, Andrea, I think that's a great point, is we have a lot of owners who are getting older, right? It's a workforce that skews older. And so changes in priorities happen. You don't want to work 60, 70 hours a week, right? You don't want to be sweeping the floor on a Saturday morning. And so These are things that need to start being transitioned because it's going to happen sooner or later.
Yes, it is. So, I think that's a really good example. It is uncomfortable to make changes like this, but at the other end, you're going to be a lot happier. So we're going to talk about some operational improvements, and this may cause some discomfort. This may seem like a lot to handle, but I want you to at least consider these. These aren't 5 magic things that every business should do. These are 5 common things. Your business may need something slightly different, but I thought these were a good set to talk about to a general audience. So we're going to talk about documenting management processes. We're going to talk about what I call a functional org chart and planning your human resources. We're going to talk about technology and how that can really benefit you in terms of supporting your decision making. We're going to talk about delegation, which is usually a very hot button topic, and also developing new leaders, which ties right in with that delegation. I think that's also a hot button topic, especially in your industry. Next. So let's dive into documenting processes. This always is the least exciting topic, right? People think they're going to have to write down every step of every process. It's going to be incredibly tedious. That's not the case. I think you probably already have the operational tasks for things like yard ops or sales, where you have a lot of turnover potentially in your staff. You probably already have those tasks documented: how we do sales, how we do yard ops, how we run a forklift. Those things are probably already documented. You're able to easily train a new person, so you don't need to spend a lot of time there. What often is missing is documentation of how you do management. So your management roles in the business. Those are usually passed down person to person on a very rare occasion when those turn over, or they're developed over time and nobody bothers to write them down because you kind of change things over time. There's no need for a step-by-step SOP for your management positions. It's just really helpful to write down the general concept for each major task area. How do we generally approach this task area? Why? What are the roadblocks to look out for? The things that are easy to make a mistake and cause a bad consequence? Where are the guardrails? Write down those things. And that way, a new person coming in, whether it's a trainee or someone temporarily taking over, they understand the concept, the big picture concept of what you're trying to do in that task area. That way they can muddle through the actual task step by step, right? But they won't make a stupid mistake because you've already given them that concept and you've given them the guardrails, so they won't go off the rails. They'll stay within what you've explained, and it's not as tedious as those step-by-step documentation processes.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and especially for folks in this industry, right? It can be easy to get focused on the tactical, right?
Mm-hmm.
Supply chain and my commercial drivers and what are the salespeople doing from day to day, and it's really important to come up to that 30,000-foot level and start thinking strategically, and this can be a good way to start that process.
Yeah, especially, a good way to think of it is ask yourself why. Why do I do it this way? And that's what you write down. Why am I doing it like this? And I think you can have a conversation with someone and have them write it down, and it will go pretty quickly, and it will really save a lot of time and pain later.
Yeah, absolutely.
So functional org chart. So you're probably all familiar with the regular org chart. You list all the people in the organization, maybe what their roles are, maybe some of their responsibilities. This starts with the functions. So not the roles, not, the title of bookkeeper, but the actual roles. Like, what does the bookkeeper do? They do bookkeeping and they do payroll. Those are 2 functions, and they're separable. So if you document those functions, and then once you've got all the functions documented, you put the names by them, by who's doing that function today. What this allows you to do is see, should there be any changes? Should we move some of these functions from one person to another? Maybe one person is getting overwhelmed because your company is growing. Maybe somebody is about to retire. Where are you going to put those functions that they're doing? Maybe you're splitting the bookkeeping and payroll. Maybe the old bookkeeper retired. They used to do both. The new bookkeeper you hired is quite junior. You don't really trust them with payroll yet. Okay, so who's going to do the payroll function? You're splitting that function off. So this functional org chart is useful over a long period of time, even as people turn over, and it's really helpful to distribute the work appropriately based on skill set, based on experience, and based on workload. The other thing that's really useful is you might identify some functions where there's not actually one person in charge of doing that function. Everybody kind of pitches in and it gets done somehow. those are things to look out for because they're typically not done very efficiently if no one's really paying attention to them and it's a side project for everybody. So those are things to maybe officially assign to one person to be responsible, even if other people pitch in and help out, one person makes sure it really got done.
Yeah. Yeah. And just making sure, efficiency, right? It gets back to efficiency, making sure that the people are doing things that they can handle and what is their best purpose, right? What is their highest purpose in the company? So.
Yeah, it has a big impact on employee engagement as well. If they're doing
Right.
things that they're good at, they enjoy, they feel productive. Technology, another word, some people love it, some people hate it, right? So you may have software already for something specific, like tracking your sales orders or keeping track of your inventory. What I would suggest is whether or not you already have software, consider whether there's anywhere where you're collecting and analyzing a lot of information by hand in order to make a decision. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Procurement. When you're placing restock orders, right? What you need is what's your current stock level? What orders have you already placed with suppliers that are going to be coming in and when are they coming in? What orders have customers placed that are going to be going out the door and when are those going out the door? And then you can decide how much to restock. Now, you might be doing that in your head. You might be doing that on paper, or you might have software that provides you all that information so that you can make the decision about that restock order. That software is really useful. That saves a lot of time. And again, efficiency. Anybody who wants any kind of report on stock, you got the software, you got the report, right? As opposed to having to go back, go back through information, collect it again, reanalyze it. So another example might be HR and timekeeping. A lot of people do paper timesheets. Some people do electronic timesheets. If you want to say, hey, are we running high on overtime right now? That HR system can give you that in touch of a button, as opposed to going and compiling a lot of data from a lot of timesheets. So think about where you're spending the most time collecting and analyzing data. Let the software do that for you and spend your mental energy on actually making the decisions based on that good information that you can get at the touch of a button.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think that's great advice. And especially in an industry where we have lots of turnover, both in terms of the products we're selling and in terms of the workforce, right? It's just the way it goes. And if we're having trouble just keeping track of that, how can we use this technology to help us? Not everything new is good and should replace some of the old stuff, but not everything new is bad. And so, it's figuring out which one to use, I think is a really key here.
Yeah, and I think it's also very strategic. What software do you invest in? Because software, hey, it's costing money and implementing it takes time and effort, right? And so you really want to be strategic about where does it make sense to insert it in your business. Some people want to, computerize absolutely everything. You can, it's a big lift, or you can strategically implement certain things in certain areas that really will save you a lot of time and energy and prevent errors. There's often a lot of errors in numbers that are hand tracked. So yeah, it's worth considering.
Very good point.
So delegation. Okay, so this one can be tough. When people hear the word delegate, they think, oh, I'm giving up control. I'm handing it off to someone junior. They're not going to make the same decision I made. Mistakes are going to occur. Bad consequences will happen. So you can delegate partially, and it has a really good effect. So you can split the final decision-making on anything, any piece of work, from the rest of the responsibility. So the leader retains that final decision-making, that final approval, but delegates to the more junior person the task of gathering the data, thinking about what decisions might be worthwhile, considering different options, researching those options, presenting a case to the senior leader, saying, hey, here's the options I came up with. Here's some ideas. And then the senior leader can say to the junior person, what decision would you make? Tell me why, right? That's a training opportunity. That junior person gets, some really interesting work as they learn more from you because you discuss why you would make a different decision. They start seeing your point of view. They start understanding your perspective. And here's where, if you want to go on vacation, hey, they could fill in for a couple of weeks, right? Because you've already had these conversations with them and you know how they think, which I think is key. You're not going to trust to delegate a final decision to someone until you really understand how they think and what kind of decisions they would make in your absence. So, and let me refer back to what Sam said, you're going to transition sooner or later, like it or not. Right? You're not going to live to be 150 years old, still running your company. It's going to happen at some point. So doing this allows you to manage it and do it at your own pace. And when you feel comfortable, making sure that the person you're delegating to is a good person to delegate to and truly trustworthy.
Yeah, it's a good point. And we were talking to a dealer client of ours on the East Coast a couple of weeks ago, who was saying that he watched how difficult it was for his uncle to transition some of these roles and responsibilities and really give up control. He was still telling them how to make decisions, even though he wasn't even in a position of ownership anymore. And so this next generation really taking it to heart. And even though it was hard for them to start giving up control, they knew how important it was, because otherwise you just get stuck where there's a lot of friction between the incoming and the outgoing about who's making the decision, and am I going to have to worry about somebody looking over my back? Not everybody's going to make the decision the same way as you. The important thing is that they're making good decisions.
Yeah, I think keeping in mind the health of the business and the longevity of the business and the legacy you're leaving is really important here. What's the right thing to do for the business? Because we all have emotions tied to our businesses, right? And we don't want to let go of control because we care, and that's perfectly valid. But the right thing to do for the business is to make sure that if you were to step away, the business would not fail, that the next person is well trained and they've had a chance to do this kind of apprenticeship with you, and they'll be in good hands going forward. That's how you leave a legacy, right?
Yeah, agreed. And it leads into the next one, which is a real hot button issue in this industry and many others.
Yeah, I almost don't need to speak to the slide, right? Like, this is exactly what we're just talking about. I do want to talk about a couple of the side benefits. Your top people at any level, at the most bottom level, when you hire someone without experience and someone starts shining in that brand new role, you train them and they really start standing out, all the way up to your deputy, right? Anywhere at any level in the company. If they have a chance to step up a bit because they're the top person in their area, and if they have a chance to see that they could grow with your company, they're going to stay with your company. If they see that they are stuck there forever in that same position forever, there's no chance for growth or learning, no chance to use their extra abilities that they've proven in service to your company, then eventually they're going to get bored and leave, right? Because they feel like they're underutilized. We all want to use ourselves to our full potential. Or most people. We know a few dead red days, but most people, right? So think about that. You've got untapped potential at every level of your organization. And if you can train them and help them take on a little more responsibility, they will really repay that in loyalty. Not only that, you're going to have people at every level who say, I could do this better than the boss. If I were the boss, I would make this decision. I would do it differently. So if you start showing them what it's like to be in your shoes and what your perspective is and the bigger picture, you're going to convert those people typically from adversaries into allies, and they're going to pull for you and your company and be your best supporter, as opposed to constantly thinking, well, I could do this better, just because they have a limited view. They don't see the full picture. And again, back up if you want to take a vacation or you're suddenly ill, you need surgery, something happens, right? So all of the above.
No, and it's just a shameless plug for LBM Journal here, but Rick had just put out an article a couple of weeks ago that outlines some of the resources that are available to you all for just this type of generational change. And it's really important that as an industry, we're collaborating here, because there are no easy solutions. It takes time, and let's get started now.
Yep. Yeah, so I'm just going to recap a little bit. As you prepare for a future transition with these suggestions or other suggestions for improving your operations, you're going to improve your current operations, right? You're going to get more profitability right now, and you're protecting against risks, and you're going to increase the long-term value of your company whenever you do decide to exit. You're able to delegate without giving up all control, and that's a good thing to do. It's a good thing to get in the habit of. You've created shareable and transferable knowledge in the company, so there's a couple of things there. If you sell, the buyer can acquire that knowledge much more easily, and so it is more of a turnkey operation, so it's worth more. And also, if there's a risk of any kind of loss, if somebody quits the business, a key person, a key manager, or if the owner decides to retire or something bad happens and they have to retire. And honestly, as an owner or a top leader in the company, you can focus on the most value-added part of your leadership, which is your knowledge and experience and your ability to manage the company well, instead of sweeping the store on Saturdays or hand compiling a lot of data or whatever you have, right? And you've got better information to make good decisions. So it is a win-win. I'm not going to pretend it's not going to be a little uncomfortable to move down this path, but I will tell you it will be worth it. I've seen people go from incredibly stressed out, owing a lot of money to the IRS, frankly, all kinds of stuff, and turned that around to, doubling their profit in just a year or two. And that was a different industry, but it really does work. Right? This really does work. So it's worth the effort, and you can do it strategically so you're not overwhelming yourself or your staff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And so changing gears just a little bit here in terms of how do you protect this, right? You've got your operations set up. How do we manage risk here? And this idea of a professional will is really important, because now this is not something you need to go to an estate attorney to get drafted like your last will and testament. This is your professional will, which helps to protect what you've built in the business and make sure that the operations can be sustainable, because there are lots of decisions that stop with you as an owner: hiring and firing, taking out loans, approving payroll, right? Maybe you're in charge of purchasing still. And these are all big, important pieces of your company. What would happen? What would happen if you weren't able to make those decisions? Who do you trust making those decisions? Being transparent about this stuff. Who has access to passwords, right? That's a huge one nowadays. Somebody ends up in a coma after a car crash. You hate to think of it, but it does happen. And now you've got a whole bunch of people who can't log into the systems because it was all with the owner. And so I think that's really important. The other thing a professional will does is it determines, how does my family fit into this? For some families, they're involved in the business. Other families, they have nothing to do with the business. And as Andrea said up top, that's not necessarily the person you want running the business, right? And so there's a difference between ownership and actual leadership. And so if your family's not involved, who would be running the business if you weren't there? Really, really important stuff to get down, because this is that continuity. This is making sure that the ifs, because they do happen, unfortunately. And so getting back to this idea of these 3 Ps, right? Predictable process, predictable profit, predictable value. Now, yes, value doesn't have a P in it, but the point here is that we're trying to drive from operations to something that's very tangible that we all care about, which is our net worth, making sure that we and our families are taken care of here. And this is that idea of, you get those processes in place, it becomes a business that's more marketable. It leads to higher multiples, which of course lead to higher value. So looking at an example here, and this is a deal fairly typical, right? About 8% on an EBITDA margin, and multiples, right? Multiples now have come down. They're not as high as they were, but let's say 4.5, just hypothetically, right? And we're looking at equity value here. So we're taking any debt out of it. And most dealers run without debt or very little debt, which is wonderful. And we're adding back cash. A lot of dealers are sitting on cash now. So don't sleep on that, because that's part of your equity value. But at 4.5 times, this particular dealer would have an equity value of 11.8. Now, let's say that we had the same exact dealer, but they had a lot of those operational processes in place that Andrea talked about. This dealer, just because of the fact that somebody wouldn't have to come into the business and invest a whole ton of time and energy trying to fix their operations or trying to figure out what the sales process is, somebody's going to be willing to pay more money for this. And it could be as much as 0.5, right? So we're going from 4.5 to 5. Now, all of a sudden, we've gone from 11.8 in equity value, right? That's what I'm walking away with as the business owner, to 13 million, right? That's $1.2 million in value that has just appeared because of the fact we invested in our operations. That's a return that I would like as a business owner. So again, let's get back to this idea of how do strong operations increase value, right? It's those three Ps. Predictability is the key. I don't want to come in and all of a sudden have something happen that I wasn't ready for. I want to see that this business is operating well so that I can grow it. I don't have to worry about fixing it, right? And I'm going to attract a stronger core crew of buyers, whether it's internal or external, but particularly external, because the external buyers are going to do a ton of due diligence on your business. Right? They are not just going to give you money. Maybe 2 years ago, there was a lot of private equity money rolling around. Now they are very picky. They understand the sustainability. They understand the industry. It's a much different ball game. And so you want to be in a position to be able to pitch for that higher value because of the fact you have something that people can make money using the tools that you've created. So let's bring this around. How can we help? And we want to help, right? Our job is education first. If we can give you some pieces of education so that you leave here going, oh, all right, I know some things I need to work on, or I need to reach out to somebody to talk about this, that's awesome. And Andrea and I, part of the way we do it is we're there with you through the implementation. We don't just give you a pamphlet and say, good luck. We'll check in on you in 6 months, because this is not something that is part of your core skill set. And that's really what we want to hammer home here. And so please feel free. Andrea and I are happy to do a joint consultation with anybody who's interested. And Rick, I think I see you coming back on there. I think, have you dropped some of these links into the chat?
Yes, I did. Yeah, if you want to look at the chat, everybody, you'll see information on how to set up a free consultation with Sam and Andrea, or Sam or Andrea. So that information is all right there. If you have and if you have any questions for Sam or Andrea, you'd like to have them answer now, go ahead and click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and type your question there. And we're going to get to as many as we can before we run out of time. And we do have a couple questions. You guys ready? Ready.
Fire away.
Born ready. All right. Well, first we have a comment. At our company, we're still a few years away from making an actual transition, so we've been holding off on even thinking about this process. However, it's clear that there's a lot we can do today to help set the stage that will help make our company stronger, not only today, but also in the future. So Sam and Andrea, thank you for this great information. So
yeah, sure. Thanks, Rick.
Yeah, this was a lot. This was really good. There's so many of our readers we hear from them who are small business people, and they're not sure about what to do for their next stage. And the transition process, the planning just needs to start as early as possible. And
and it'll benefit you, right? Like doing it early benefits you. It's exactly like, when my sister and brother-in-law sold their house, right? They fixed up their bathroom right before they sold it. And they're like, why didn't we do this 10 years ago and enjoy the bathroom like fixed up, right? Like it's the same thing. Like do it while you can enjoy the benefit of it, not only for sale. Yeah.
Exactly. All right, now questions. How do I convince my managers to train up younger leaders when they're worried about being replaced?
That's a tough one. Yeah. So, I think, I don't know how to put this, but every level has the same fear. The owner has a level of being replaced, a fear of being replaced. The top manager has a fear of being replaced. Everybody's got a fear of being replaced. So it kind of starts from the top. If you set the groundwork to say, look, all of us eventually are replaceable. Doesn't mean we're replaceable right now. We don't want to replace you right now, but we do want to retain our staff, which is a key driver. Like those managers might be tired of rehiring for positions under them, and they don't have to give up their position. They can get some help with their position. Hopefully your businesses are growing, maybe in a slow and steady manner, maybe in a rapid manner, but even in a slow and steady manner, as they're growing, as the manager is taking on more responsibility themselves, because you're delegating a bit of your responsibility to them, you can point out to them that they can delegate some of their less interesting work to the next level. So it trickles down from the top. You can't tell your managers to do it if you're not willing to do it, unfortunately, right? So I think that's one way to approach it, and to have an honest conversation with them that this desire to train the lower levels is not because you want to replace them. They're very valuable. But if something were to happen to them, the business would be in trouble. The business needs cross-training. The business needs strong people who can take over if you're sick or on vacation. Like all of the things we already said, right? Let's take those to the managers. They're not going to love it at first, but if you also make it clear to the trainees that they should not expect that they're going to step into the manager's role right now, right? This is a way for them to learn and grow. And if and when an opportunity opens up, they'll be ready, and we'll rely on you a little more. We'll give you a little more responsibility. So I think clear expectations at every level is probably the best way to go.
Sounds good. All right. Can you give an example of how you could delegate without giving up control?
So bill payment, this was in a landscaping company, actually. So the owner was paying every bill. This is a $2 million business plus, 30 plus employees, maybe smaller than a lot of your operations, but still substantial enough. And she was looking at every bill and approving it. You know how much time that took? It was crazy, like crazy. So we convinced her to have someone else check the bills for accuracy against what was expected. Like, hey, you're going to order a whole bunch of sod for something and you expect it to be $1,000. And if the bill comes in at $1,000, we can just pay it. We already expected it to be $1,000, right? The rent, she doesn't need to approve the rent on the yard that she rented, right? The lease is what it is, that can just be paid. So we took away the low-hanging fruit. And then for the ones where she did need to put her eyes on it, we made sure that her managers looked at them first, make sure they were in order, took care of any discrepancies, and then she could just look at them and approve them. We did use a piece of software, but you could do that even manually. If need be. And if you wanted to do software, there's a whole ton of software that will make that process very easy. So she can be driving around and check her bills on her cell phone and approve them. And that worked just fine.
Yeah,
well,
and I think,
oh, go ahead, Sam.
yeah, I was going to say, to add to this, there's this idea of control, which can be handled through things like voting and non-voting shares or different classes of ownership. And then there's this idea of leadership and mentoring and how do we pass along knowledge. And those are two different things. And I would encourage everybody to think that, so in my line of work, right, we do a lot of these educational things. Nobody has come, no LBM dealer has come and said, hey, Sam, you know what? I'm going to do your job because, I know so much. So don't be afraid to help people understand things, because part of that is helping them understand that there's a lot more underneath it than just, hey, Rick's the boss, so he gets to say what goes. Well, there's a lot more to it. And so teaching people about it, about what it takes, there's a lot of nuance there. And the other thing I would say is if you're a younger person, this concept of managing up and understanding that management goes both ways and the communication needs to go both ways, and everybody needs to get comfortable with that. And that's a cultural thing that it does come from the top as the owner, but it shouldn't be a lock on good ideas just at the mid-level manager and up. I mean, it could come from the guys in the yard. They see an inefficiency out there in the way that trucks are being loaded. And geez, we're having to come back a lot as opposed to just going on one trip and packing everything the way that it should be so we can deliver it in the most efficient manner. Things like that, I think, are really important, that come from the people that are actually doing those jobs as opposed to the people who are farther removed from them.
Absolutely.
All right, and your answers kind of lead into the next question. Implementing new technology seems extremely overwhelming and time consuming. I'm not a tech savvy person. Where can we start?
I think that really starts with an overall operational assessment to see where could software ease the burden, right? Because putting in software that's not going to actually make a noticeable impact on your operation, you're not going to notice less work or fewer errors or a higher productivity. That's just a waste of time. So let's first identify areas where, hey, with a little bit of automation, a little bit of having the software collect the data and then compile it for you, that would make a big difference. And then we can just implement that, right? And if that ties into some of your other functions, we can see whether we could implement one function and then the next function that would feed off the first one. So it's hard to say, here's what you should start with without seeing your operation already, because you may already have inventory software or sales order software, right? You might have point of sale. So let's say you have point of sale software, does it have an inventory module? If not, let's do that. If it does it have good reporting? Like often software will have like not very good reports, and there's ways to improve that reporting so that you can then pull the data you've got, the inventory system. Let's get the reports you need out of the inventory system. So those are maybe very small examples, but it really depends on where are you feeling the pain and how could we use software to solve that pain, because then the pain of implementation is typically less than the pain of that you're ongoing experiencing, and it'll seem to pay off for itself, right? So any thoughts, Sam?
Yeah, And I would add to that this gets back to that idea of training and developing that next level of leadership. Is that
Yep.
I bet you there's somebody in your workforce who is more tech savvy than you. What a great opportunity to give them a project to help bring them along. And again, this is this idea of delegating without giving up control. They're not the one who's making a decision about whether or not you purchase this software or this add-on. They're just coming to you, or maybe it's just running a report, like Andrea said. They're coming to you with suggestions. Hey, maybe we should try this, or maybe we should do this. But giving them an opportunity to lead a project like that can be really impactful to retention and growth within your staff as well.
I completely agree. And I want to add on to that. What people will try to do that. And then the junior person, I'm sure we've all experienced this. They're super enthusiastic and they're like, we can change this and this and this, and it'll be great. And then you shut them down because it's crazy, right? They're suggesting crazy things. No problem. Be clear on your expectations on both sides, right? So when you give this project to the junior person, say, hey, I want you to bring me options. And then I'm going to discuss each option with you. You're going to tell me why you think it's a good idea. And I'm going to talk through it with you. And if I vote against it, I'm going to explain to you why. And if the answer is just, we've always done it this other way, I want you to, the uncomfortable part, challenge yourself a little bit. Try to picture if you did it this new way. And there may be reasons not to do it, but let them be substantial reasons that, again, serve the business the best way the business is served, not necessarily personal discomfort, because this type of change can be very uncomfortable. So do be honest with yourself and with the junior person. We're not going to do that because it would cause this disruption in this part of the business, or it would increase this risk in the business. Those are good reasons not to. But if there's no real business reason not to, give it a shot. See if it'll, take it seriously, and you will win a convert for life in that junior person, as Sam said, who got to exercise their brain and got to bring value to the company, frankly.
All right. And our last question kind of goes back, another segue from that last question. If our business operation has been running profitably for 30 years, why change it now?
Sam, you want to tackle that, or shall I?
Yeah, I would say, again, we can all do things better, and getting an objective opinion sometimes can be a good check on what you've been doing. And it's not that you haven't been profitable or that you haven't been running well, but what are the areas that you could do a little bit better? Because the industry is changing, right? There are all kinds of articles out there about, what does the yard of the future look like, and what about this technology and that technology? And it may be that, like Andrew said, some of this stuff is not really good for your business, but some of it may be, and some of it may make it more efficient for you to run the business, or make it easier for you to recruit and retain. Because this is where we start thinking a little bit bigger and strategically about, okay, if I've got somebody who's in the yard, right, driving a forklift, how do I show them a path forward? Because that's where a lot of people start in this industry, and maybe they do have good ideas. How do we get those people involved so that they can go up the chain, as opposed to what's traditionally been the more autocratic style of top down, we make the decisions, we tell you what to do, and you go execute it. Well, nobody has a lock on good ideas, I would say. And so keep that in mind. And this gets back to that challenge part that Andrea talks about, is that this is challenging, and it's uncomfortable to do things or think about doing things differently, but it's never a bad thing, right? We all grow, and if we collaborate and work together. And so that would be my challenge to anybody out there, is that there probably are things that you could do better, and having somebody come and take a look can be very helpful.
Yeah, I would add that there are businesses that I've come and done an operational assessment on, and they're running really well. And there's not really an operational improvement that needs to be made. They're running efficiently. Their profit margins are good. Everything's good. But maybe they haven't documented how they do things for a smooth transition, right? So again, that future view. Or maybe things are running relatively smoothly, but they're leaving some potential profit on the table. They're leaving some efficiency on the table. It's not that it's not profitable. It could be more profitable. And so you also want to think, am I comfortable with that? And, if the owner says, yeah, I'm comfortable with that, I'm okay staying at this lower profit margin, I don't want to make that change, I'll let the next owner make that change. And meanwhile, I'll document what we do. And the next owner, I want to leave it essentially a little bit of a fixer-upper house, right? And let the new owner redo the kitchen. Okay, that's fine. That's your choice. But at least you've made a conscious choice. You're not just kind of closing your eyes to it and saying, I'm sure it's fine. I think it's good to actually understand what's going on in your business, understand the choices you're making, and make them consciously.
And just think about how it all drives back to that profitability and value piece, right? It's
Yeah.
it's
How do you
fine
wanna
if
exit?
you don't want to, make these changes, but one of the reasons that it's important to do things like sit down and do a post-ownership cash flow analysis is, what am I going to need out of this business? Because you may need that extra 0.5% or so of profit margin to get the value out of the business if you've invested everything you have in the business and haven't built up a lot of wealth other places. That's a different ball game. And so it is important to start thinking through what you might need to take away from the business, because that will impact a lot of the decision making around, do I need to make this business more valuable or not?
Mhm.
All right, and the last question, we have someone who asked, are you willing to share your the slides?
Yeah,
Sure.
absolutely. I'll send those to you, Rick, right after this.
Perfect. That sounds great. And then we'll send them out with the link to the recording to everybody who registered. So Sam and Andrea, thank you. This was excellent. And thank you for everybody for joining us.
Yeah,
And-
our pleasure, Rick. Thanks for having us.
And we'll see you next time. Have
Take
a
care,
good day.
everybody. Happy 4th.
Goodbye.
Bye.